In the last video, I shared details about transforming this old retired school bus into this Skoolie RV toy hauler, a transformation that would take me across America. I stuffed the motorcycle in the back after installing my bed and kitchen and started traveling. I left Birmingham on the first leg of my journey and wound up in Missouri. I would like to introduce you to my traveling companion. This is the dude, a 13-year-old retired racing greyhound. The dude is an old man, and he never really took to the bus very well. He's just a homebody mostly, but he does like to get out and romp around in the grass, which we did quite a bit on our journey. The first real legit camping experience was in Missouri on Clearwater Lake Park, and although it was beautiful and a very pleasant stay, it just reaffirmed my belief that being in nature away from people as far as possible is the way I want to live. As we drove northwest, it became very evident that the rolling hills were giving way to the flatter, longer plains. Not that the rolling hills disappeared, they just became smaller and longer. I tried to make as many pee stops as possible, since the dude really does not enjoy riding in the bus. I broke up the journey by stopping as often as I could with as many interesting stops, and this was one of many interesting stops. The funny thing, as you will observe, is the dude is playing nonchalant with the horses and pretending that they're not really there. That's his thing when he's intimidated. Smaller animals he would go right up to and sniff and play with, but the larger ones he just tended to ignore. Just pretend the giant dog is not there. That's his game. I have had the pleasure of being around quite a few retired racers, and they are all very interesting and unique. But one of the things that I tell people that are interested in greyhounds is they're less like dogs and much more like cats. They're much less like dogs in the fact that while they're affectionate, they don't hop up in your lap and jump up on you typically. They're very reserved and very quiet most of the time, and the only energy that they typically expend is when they're running around. This interaction on the edge of Missouri was at a pit stop, a refueling stop, where I noticed that the owner of the fenced property had some critters. One is obviously a deer, this one, and the other ones look like some kind of albino deer type. You're gonna get hurt, buddy. Dude was very interested in these guys, although they were much more dangerous than the horses previously visited. The guy with the big antlers was scaring the other younger animals away every time we dished out some nuts or whatever came out of that dispenser. You put in a quarter and the dispenser dispensed into the feeding trough. Pretty interesting little setup, and dude was very attracted to these dogs that looked like him. It was pretty funny. Great little pit stop for him. As I mentioned before, dude really does not like riding in vehicles. I think it probably stems from his racing career, where he was always in a vehicle before a big race. Didn't like it. As we made our way across the plains of Kansas, we finally wound up in one of the 8 wonders of Kansas, a place called Monument Rocks. This place is extraordinary. mostly of how it stands out in the middle of the plains, like a civilization that has fallen into disrepair. Something that's quite striking, and something that I will never forget. A reasonable person might ask how these structures were formed. Well, 90 million years ago, half of Kansas was underwater, under the sea. An inland seaway covered half of Kansas. And the result was a sea floor full of skeletons of the microorganisms that swam in the sea millions of years ago. After millions of years of the continent rising and the seas receding, what is left is the chalk formations due to erosion. Man, this place is a moonscape. Rolling grasslands. Sometimes it's very difficult to tell a story when the wind is blowing. The lasting impression that was made those 2 days was the similarity in the natural structure and man-made structures. From a distance, this looks like this could easily be a castle or the remnants. Even up close, it looks like a man-made structure. Doorways, windows, something that could easily be confused for man-made was simply the sea floor from millions of years ago. It was quite striking. So the dude and I spent the evening walking on literally trillions of sea creatures and their skeletons from millions of years ago on what once was the sea floor. It was fascinating to think of the amount of time that it took to accumulate this many skeletons and this much depth below the sea. And then on top of all that, the time it took to push the earth up above sea level and then to erode it. It just boggled my mind. A few other tourists came through that evening, and we wound up spending the night, for the first time, boondocking on public land. It was amazing. At any point, I assumed that a ranger would show up and tell us we had to leave, or write a ticket or something like that. But my first experience was my best experience. Hope you can hear the coyotes. I didn't hear them at all last night. Apparently they want to get up early in the morning.